When I started Crenshaw Cru, I didn't know what the word permaculture meant, and I'd never heard of a wine garden. I thought these rows of vines were my vineyard. None of this was here 10 years ago. It was a typical Los Angeles yard with grass and a wasteful sprinkler system. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted beauty and food and shade and wine. As I planted things and observed how they grew, I began to see that the yard had its own ideas, so to speak, about what it could do. I thought first about what I wanted, and I built a plan based on that. But I never stopped to ask what the land wanted. And so, after just 4 years, I had to rip out the first vines I planted in the front yard. They were already dying, they were so diseased. It was a painful lesson, but for the first time I began to deprioritize my whims and wants, and I began to listen to the land. What did it want? What would be best for it rather than for me? My priorities began to change. As the plants and trees grew in, I began to see the overlapping benefits that the diversity of life provided to each other. I began to think that maybe the vineyard was more than just the rows of vines. I began to see my whole yard as the vineyard. Welcome to the Crenshaw Cru Winegarden. This is a perennial, multi-story polyculture that expresses itself in wine and is based on the principles of permaculture. Permaculture is a way of seeing the relationships of all things in an ecosystem and how they can be designed to support and regenerate each other. It derives from honoring the intimate connections within all natural systems. The cactus, the guy filming the cactus, and you there watching the video of the cactus, we're all connected in very real ways. Thank you for connecting, by the way. We're as much a part of this ecosystem as the vines and flowers and critters. Wine to me is not a luxury, neither is it a commodity. It's one of the things that we do as humans to show that life is about more than survival. Wine is our reminder to feed that part of ourselves that food can't satisfy. Nature is profusely beautiful. We often lose sight of our need for beauty when it comes to farming. We think of straight rows and efficiency and practicality and frugality. But what about wonder? I want to focus on building a beautiful culture into viticulture. I want my wine to come from a place that makes my heart beat quicker. As this ecosystem has matured, it has become this multi-dimensional space that has deliciousness and beauty in every level. It's full of little nooks and secret spots where I might find a lizard or a ladybug or a sleeping cat. I love that I helped foster this sense of home for all these creatures and myself. I get to see this landscape every day, and it changes the way I feel and think as it changes. But I guess when I use the word nature, I'm already in trouble. This language limits us from expressing reality in so many ways. We've come to think of nature as the other, separate from ourselves and out there. But really, we just invented that idea. Crenshaw Cru is meant to be a reminder that we are nature. Right here in the center of Los Angeles, we are part of the ecosystem. And contrary to popular belief, we aren't bad for the earth. For most of history, until recently, we not only didn't hurt the earth, we enhanced it in many ways. We figured out ways to encourage abundance, health, and resilience in our world and communities. This is our human legacy. The climate crisis isn't our legacy. It's just the result of our disconnection. As we became more and more disconnected from the systems that enable us to survive and thrive, we took them for granted, and we overused them. We wasted them. We took and we didn't give back because we no longer saw the emptiness that resulted when we took. Almost everything is edible at Crenshaw Cru. On one small suburban lot, We produce enough to share with many neighbors, and we don't work that hard at it. One of the lovely things about regenerating systems is that they are largely self-sustaining. The flowers sow themselves each year, and perennial, locally adapted trees and plants seldom need watering. There's work to be done, of course, but it's meaningful work. It's work that feels good to do and makes me feel good after I've done it. It builds my health as it builds the health of the wine garden. And I've come to realize that when you grow and tend plants, you're also cultivating yourself. The soil really is our winery. I give something to the soil every season, many times throughout the year. I build compost and make compost teas. We plant cover crops as needed in the late autumn. I put the prunings from vines and trees onto the soil to slowly break down and create a fungal dominance microbiome. We have a green bin for yard waste that the city will pick up, but we haven't quite figured out what yard waste is. Everything that dies goes back into the soil that it grew from. I joke that I'm a dirt hoarder. I've learned something with every vine that I've planted and every year that I've tended them. And I leave a wild space for generation, for things to happen on their own. These are all vines that grew from seed. And one of the exciting things that happens when you allow a space for wildness is you get new things, you get generation. These are the first grapes from some of these vines growing from seed, and they've never grown before on Earth. They're a whole new variety of grape. I've become disillusioned with the wire and post trellising system of the VSP system. It's a system of disconnection and efficiency built to facilitate the use of machinery. I want a cultivated ecosystem of cultural beauty. I think a garden should be interactive, but when I look at the trellises, they look like fences and barriers to interaction. I plan to train the vines up overhead and remove the wires. These vines could create shade in the summer and allow for us to walk and picnic underneath. I would love to have a vineyard that requires a community to take care of it, not something that can just be tended by one person on a tractor. I've stopped planting trees and I've started launching ecosystems instead. Now when I plant multiple species together. I plant trees with vines and flowers. I think only us humans see individual plants. Biodiversity is essential to the resilience and beauty of Crenshaw Cru. There's so much more that we could be doing, even with all this. I wish we had installed a gray water reuse system, and I have plans to install a really huge rainwater collection system. But I definitely think that our community and this land are served better by what I've done, than if I had left it a yard of grass. This kind of wine gardening culture is abundant and profligate with beauty. Some might call it messy, but I've stopped fearing mess. Connecting with the diverse life and cycles of growth and decay here at Crenshaw Cru have allowed me to see how my own life and death cycle is part of the same system. I don't fear that death anymore. It isn't horrific and ugly. It's transformational and beautiful and necessary. I like to pretend when I add compost or mulch to the soil that I'm making an offering. Someday, the offering I make will be my own body. When people drink my wine, I want them to love it, but I want them to seek it out because of how it was grown. I want people to say, "Have you seen his wine garden? It's magical." That must be why the wine is so good. To me, the context of wine is so much more interesting than the wine. Where did it come from? What is the story of the people and the culture that it grew from? Is that story motivated by greed and fear, or did that wine grow from a story motivated by love and appreciation? Crenshaw Cru is my collaboration with a piece of the world to help demonstrate that a vineyard is more than rows of vines. It has taught me that everything is connected. And once I saw that, I began to realize that this was my vineyard. this was my vineyard. And this was my vineyard. And really, this is my vineyard. And ultimately, this is our vineyard. And I want to ask how we can serve the needs of this rare and wonderful garden, rather than how it can serve us.